There's a place on the edge of the Arctic where, for months of the year, the women are left to run everything, alone. The men sail out onto the North Atlantic and vanish for weeks at a time, chasing fish in some of the deadliest waters on Earth. And while they're gone, the sun barely shows up either. It crawls over the mountains around 9 in the morning and is gone again by 3 in the afternoon, leaving these 18 storm-battered islands in a long blue half-darkness. So picture her, waking in the black before dawn, getting the children fed by lamplight, fixing what breaks, deciding what's safe, holding the whole household together, while the person she loves is somewhere out past the horizon, beyond all reach, and a storm is building against the windows. How does anyone survive a winter like that? Mostly on their own. What is it actually like inside her head by February? And why? This is the strange part. Would so many of these women tell you they wouldn't trade it for anything? Welcome to the Faroe Islands, and to the women who quietly keep an entire nation alive through the dark. In this video, we're going to take you deep inside that world. You'll meet the wives who lie awake counting the gusts during every storm, and discover the secret network of women who quietly raise each other's children. We'll show you what months of darkness slowly do to the human mind, and the strange, defiant way these islanders fight back. You'll find out why this country actually ran short of women, and where the ones who left all went. We'll take you to an island home to a single family, past villages the world simply forgot, and along roads that run beneath the floor of the ocean. You'll even see the food they leave out in the wind to rot, on purpose, just to make it through the winter. By the end, you'll understand the one hidden truth that almost no visitor to these islands ever sees. So stay with us, because this is a side of the Faroe Islands that the postcards never show you. Number 12. A nation scattered across the sea. Picture trying to run daily life across 18 separate islands, where your nearest neighbor might be on the other side of a fjord, and the only way to reach them is a road carved into the side of a cliff, or a ferry that simply stops running when the weather turns. The Faroes are tiny, but they are not simple. The population clusters mostly on the main island, Streymoy, around the colorful little capital of Tórshavn. Yet life spills outward into dozens of villages clinging to the coastline, some with only a handful of families left in them. In a place this small, isolation isn't an abstract idea. It's the texture of everyday life. A village of 200 people is a world unto itself. Everyone knows everyone. A new face in town is genuinely big news. And when winter closes in, those tiny communities don't just feel remote. They become remote, sometimes for days at a time. Now imagine being the person responsible for keeping a family fed, warm, and safe inside one of those houses, on one of those islands, in the dead of December. Because that responsibility, more often than not, falls to one specific group of people. And to understand why, you first have to understand the darkness. Number 11. When the sun barely shows up. Let's clear something up, because there's a myth about this place. The Faroes don't sit inside the Arctic Circle. The sun doesn't vanish for months on end the way it does in the far north of Norway or Greenland, but sitting at 62 degrees north, on the very edge of the Arctic. The winters here do something almost as disorienting in its own way. At the depth of winter, around the December solstice, the islands get barely 5 hours of daylight. The sun crawls up around 9:30 in the morning and slips away again by 3 in the afternoon. And daylight is generous. At midday in December, the sun sits only a few degrees above the horizon, hidden half the time behind towering mountains and a permanent ceiling of cloud. So in many of the deep valleys and fjord-side villages, the practical usable light of day can shrink to just 3 or 4 hours of dim, silver gloom. Now think about what that means for the woman running a home. You wake in darkness. You do the school run in darkness. You hang the laundry, which will never quite dry in the damp, in darkness. By the time you finish the day's real work, the sky outside the bow window has already gone black again. The entire stretches of life happen without ever seeing the sun. There's a strange, almost underwater quality to a Faroe's winter day. People describe it not as night exactly, but as a long blue twilight that never fully commits to morning. And here's the thing about that twilight. It's hard enough to live through with a full house, but across these islands for much of the year, the houses aren't full, because the men are gone. Number 10. The men who disappear into the Atlantic. Fishing isn't just a job in the Faroe Islands. It's the foundation the entire country is built on. The sea is where the money comes from. Fishing and salmon farming have made this one of the wealthiest small nations in the North Atlantic, with some skippers reportedly earning enormous sums. The industry employs a sizable share of the whole workforce, but that wealth comes at a price that doesn't show up on any balance sheet. When a trawler leaves the harbor, it doesn't come back that evening. It might be gone for a week. It might be gone for 2 months, working distant fishing grounds in some of the roughest water on the planet. The men who crew these boats live a hard, physical, dangerous life, and while they're away, an entire other life carries on without them back on land. And someone has to run that life. So the woman at home becomes everything at once. She's the mother and, in every practical sense, the father too. She's the one who fixes the broken pipe, who handles the money, who deals with the school, who calms the frightened child at 2 a.m, who decides whether the weather is too dangerous to drive the mountain road. She makes every decision, large and small, completely on her own. For weeks, in the dark, in the cold, the Faroes have always celebrated the image of the strong, self-reliant man, the rugged figure who provides for his family from the sea. But spend any time here and you'll hear the same quiet truth again and again. The women are every bit as tough. They have to be. And no one carries that weight more heavily than the woman who lies awake at night, listening to the wind, married to a man on a boat. Number 9. The fisherman's wife and the fear in every storm. There's a particular kind of fear that you can only understand if you've lived it. It arrives with the wind. It starts as a low moan against the windows and builds through the night into a roar that shakes the whole house. The rain comes sideways. The power flickers. And somewhere out there, beyond all that black water, is the one person you can't reach, can't see, can't help. Ask a fisherman's wife in the Faroes about storms, and her face changes. Because she knows the sea has taken men from these islands. Every village has its memories, its names, its empty chairs. The ocean that feeds this nation has also, across the centuries, quietly buried a great many of its sons and husbands. So when the forecast turns and the boat is out there, she does what generations of Faroese women have done before her. She keeps the house running so the children won't sense the dread. She checks her phone, knowing the signal might be gone. She tells herself he's done this 100 times. And she waits. It's an old, almost unbearable arrangement. The woman on shore holding her breath for the man at sea. But it's not a story of helplessness. The women who live this life describe a strange, hard-won steadiness. You learn not to fall apart, because there's no one there to put you back together. You learn that worry doesn't bring the boat home any faster. You learn to function inside the fear. And crucially, she isn't really doing it alone. Not entirely. Because in the Faroes, there's an invisible safety net that catches these women, and it's unlike almost anything in the modern world. What is it? That's where this story gets surprising. Number 8. The women who raise each other's children. In most of the world today, raising a child can be a lonely, isolating experience. A parent and a closed front door. In the Faroe Islands, it works the opposite way. These communities are built on something the Faroes carry deep in their language, a sense of family that stretches far beyond the household. Grandmothers, aunts, sisters, cousins, neighbors, old school friends. In a village this small, the lines between family and everyone else blur until they nearly disappear. When the men are at sea and the dark months close in, the women close ranks. Practically, it looks like this. One woman watches the children while another drives the icy road to the shop in the next village. Meals get shared. School runs get traded back and forth. If a child is sick at 3 in the morning and the husband's 100 miles out on the water, there's always a phone number that someone will answer. The load that would crush one person gets quietly spread across many shoulders. This is how the impossible becomes survivable. Not through heroism exactly, but through a web of women who have silently agreed to carry one another. A child here doesn't really have one mother in the practical sense. They have a whole village of them. It's one of the most beautiful things about life on these islands, and it's almost completely invisible to the tourists who pass through chasing waterfalls and puffins. It's the thing that holds the darkness back. But even the strongest network can't fully shield a person from what those long, lightless winters do to the inside of the human head. Number 7. What the long dark does to the mind. There's a reason people who live at these latitudes talk so much about light. When you go weeks barely seeing the sun, when you wake in the dark and you sleep in the dark, and the few hours in between are a flat gray smear, something in the body starts to drift. The sleep gets strange. The energy drains away. A heaviness settles over the day that's hard to name and harder to shake. Scientists have a clinical term for the worst of it, but the Faroes mostly just call it winter. For a woman doing the work of 2 parents through that darkness, the mind becomes its own kind of battlefield. There's the loneliness of the empty side of the bed, the cabin fever sameness of days that all blur together, the way a storm can lock you indoors for so long that the walls seem to lean inward. And yet, and this is the part that stays with you, the Faroes have built an entire culture designed to push back against exactly this. They lean hard into warmth and togetherness. The long evenings become a reason to gather, not a reason to hide. Neighbors appear at the door. Coffee is always on. There's a deep tradition of storytelling, of music, of song that fills the dark hours. With something other than silence, Faroese homes glow with candles and lamplight against the black windows, an almost defiant coziness. And when the sky does clear, the reward can be the northern lights, rippling green and violet over the mountains. A private show for the people tough enough to be there to see it. The winter tests them, but it has also, over 1,000 years, taught them how to endure. The darkness made the culture, and the culture survives the darkness. Still, not everyone chooses to stay and fight that battle year after year. And that single fact has created one of the most peculiar social situations in all of Europe. Number 6. The islands that ran short of women. Here's a fact that surprises almost everyone who hears it. The Faroe Islands have a shortage of women. For decades, young Faroese women have been leaving. Not for a season, but for good. The reason is straightforward and a little heartbreaking. Growing up, a girl here sees an economy and a way of life built largely around traditionally male work: fishing, farming, the sea. If she wants to study something more academic or creative, or build a different kind of career, she often has to leave for Copenhagen or somewhere else in Europe. And once she's built a life out there, many never come back. The result is a genuine demographic imbalance. At one point, men outnumbered women by close to 2,000. And the gap is sharpest among young adults, in exactly the villages that can least afford it. A Faroese prime minister once named these skewed gender demographics as one of the greatest challenges the nation faced. In some remote settlements, you'll find clusters of single men, fishermen and farmers, quietly aware that the women they grew up with are simply gone. This is the real story hiding behind the lazy cliches about the famously striking looks of Nordic women. The Faroes aren't short on beauty. They're short on people willing to stay. Dating here can mean looking far beyond the islands. And a number of Faroes men have married women from abroad, who've come north for love and had to learn, almost overnight, what it means to live in a place where it rains 300 days a year and the winter sun is just a rumor. But things are shifting. The economy has diversified and grown wealthy. The university in Tórshavn is expanding. Remote work has opened doors that didn't exist a generation ago. And a new wave of Faroese women, some returning from abroad in their 20s, determined to raise families here on their own terms, are quietly rewriting what a woman's life on these islands can be. Some are even running for parliament on a simple promise: make the Faroes a place women no longer feel they have to run away from, which makes the women who do stay, who choose this hard, dark, demanding life, all the more remarkable. And it raises a very practical question. In a place this isolated, in winter, how on earth do you even keep a family fed? Number 5. Meat left to rot in the wind. Walk behind an old Faroes house, and you might spot a strange little wooden shed with gaps deliberately left between the slats, so the wind whistles straight through it. Inside, hanging in the cold salt air, are whole legs of mutton, slowly turning a greenish color, giving off a smell that one famous food writer described as somewhere between Parmesan cheese and death. Welcome to Skirpikshot. This is one of the strangest, most iconic foods on the planet. And it exists for one reason: survival. For most of Faroe's history, salt was a luxury these isolated islands couldn't easily get. No salt meant no normal way to preserve meat for the long winter. So the Faroes turned to the one thing they had in endless supply: the relentless North Atlantic wind. They hang the mutton in that slatted shed, called a chaleur, and let the wind and time do the work. Over 5 to 9 months, the meat ferments and dries, growing a crust of mold and developing a flavor so intense that outsiders often mistake it for spoiled. The Faroes consider it a delicacy. There's an earlier, softer stage called rest, semi-fermented, even funkier, that's eaten through the winter, sliced thin, and laid on dark rye bread. To an outsider it sounds revolting, but understand what it really is. It's the taste of self-reliance. It's a whole people figuring out how to feed their families through months of darkness and storms, using nothing but wind, patience, and deep know-how passed down through generations, much of it held and practiced by the women running those kitchens. That same ingenuity born from isolation shows up everywhere on these islands, especially in the almost unbelievable ways the Faroes have solved the problem of simply getting from one place to another. Number 4. Roads beneath the ocean and a helicopter for the mail. Now here's a problem. You've got 18 islands separated by deep, furious channels of seawater. You've got children who need to get to school, groceries that need to come in, a doctor who might be a fjord away, and you've got winter weather that can shut down a ferry without warning. So how do you keep a scattered island nation connected? The Faroes' answer is genuinely jaw-dropping. They've drilled tunnels underneath the ocean. A growing network of subsea tunnels now links the main islands, running deep below the seabed. One of them, the Eysturoy Tunnel, contains something that exists nowhere else on Earth: a roundabout, fully under the sea, lit up like an art installation in the rock. People here casually drive beneath the Atlantic on their way to work. And where the tunnels don't reach, there's an even more remarkable lifeline: a publicly subsidized helicopter service that hops between the most remote islands and villages, often for a strikingly small fare. For the handful of families on the tiniest, most cut-off specks of land, the helicopter is the school bus, the supply run, the connection to the rest of the world. For a mother in a remote village, this infrastructure is everything. It's the difference between isolation and a manageable life. The engineering that lets her get a sick child to a doctor, or simply restock the pantry when the seas are too wild for boats. But even with tunnels and helicopters, there are places in the Faroes so remote that only the most stubborn souls remain. And some of those places have already lost their fight against the silence. Number 3. One family on an island and the village is the world. Forgot out in the open ocean sits an island called Stora Dimon. For a long stretch of its modern history, it has been home to essentially a single family, a couple raising children and tending sheep, alone, on a green rock surrounded by nothing but water and weather. For years, the only reliable link to the outside world was that helicopter, a few times a week, if the weather allowed. Their children learned from home. Their nearest neighbors are seabirds. It is, by almost any measure, one of the most isolated family homes on Earth. Then there's Mykenes, the westernmost island, famous for its puffins. And in winter, home to barely a handful of year-round residents, the ferry and helicopter often cut off entirely by the sea. or villages like Trelanes, at the far tip of a long cliff-bound island, reachable only through a narrow single-lane tunnel hacked through the mountain. And then there are the places that didn't survive at all. Scattered across the Faroes are the ghosts of abandoned settlements, clusters of stone ruins slowly sinking back into the grass, villages where families once fished and farmed and raised children, now left to the wind and the sheep. They emptied out as people drifted toward the towns, toward easier lives, toward the wider world. Each one is a quiet monument to just how hard this place can be to hold on to. Stand among those roofless walls, and you can almost hear the lives that used to fill them. These empty villages are a warning the Faroes understand in their bones. A community survives only as long as people are willing to stay and do the work. And in the remote Faroes, an enormous share of that work, the daily, invisible, life-sustaining work, has always rested on women. So what does it actually cost to keep one of these households alive? The numbers might surprise you. Number 2, the price of living at the edge of the world. You might assume that life in such a remote place is dirt cheap. It isn't. The Faroe Islands are an expensive place to live, roughly on par with their pricey Nordic neighbors, and broadly comparable to a wealthy European capital. Renting a one-bedroom apartment in the heart of Tórshavn runs into the hundreds of pounds a month, and a family home costs considerably more. Everything that has to be shipped in across that hostile ocean, much of the food, the goods, the fuel, carries the cost of its long, difficult journey. Eating out is a luxury. Even a modest restaurant meal can sting. But here's the balance that makes it work. Wages are high. The fishing and salmon economy has made the Faroes genuinely prosperous, with income levels that have climbed dramatically over the past 2 decades. A typical net salary, combined with strong public services, free-flowing nature, short commutes, and one of the safest, tightest-knit societies on the planet, means that for many families the math comes out in their favor. For the woman running the household, though, the budget is just one more thing she's managing largely on her own, while the main earner is offshore. She's the household's finance minister as well as everything else, stretching the money across the dark months, planning around ferry schedules and storms, making sure there's always enough. And when you add it all up, the darkness, the isolation, the fear, the cost, the sheer relentlessness of it, you arrive at the real hidden truth of these islands, the one almost no visitor ever sees. Number 1, the women are the reason any of it survives. Here is the thing the puffin photos and the tourist brochures will never tell you. The Faroe Islands are not held together by fish or by money or by all those astonishing tunnels under the sea. They are held together by women, by the mother making breakfast in the dark at 9 in the morning, by the wife lying awake counting the gusts during a storm, by the grandmother who takes the children so a neighbor can breathe, by the network of women stretched across 18 islands who long ago decided, without ever saying it out loud, that no one here gets to drown alone. The men are celebrated as the strong ones, the providers, the rugged heroes of the sea, and they are. But it is the women who keep the lights on in the long dark. It is the women who hold the line against the loneliness, who keep the children fed and steady and unafraid, who keep entire villages from becoming yet another set of ruins in the grass. They do it without a great deal of fanfare. Ask one of them how she copes, and you're more likely to get a shrug and a joke about the weather than a speech. That understatement is itself part of the strength. This is a people who have spent more than 1,000 years learning how to endure a place that, on paper, should be almost impossible to live in. And the most remarkable part? Most of them wouldn't trade it. For all the darkness and fear and isolation, there's a freedom out here, a closeness, a belonging that the crowded modern world has mostly lost. The same darkness that tests them is the darkness that binds them together. That's the secret of the Faroe Islands, not the scenery. The people who refuse to leave it. So the next time you see those impossibly beautiful photographs, the grass-roofed houses, the waterfalls pouring into the sea, the green cliffs vanishing into the mist, Remember what's happening behind those tiny lit windows in the depth of winter. Remember that somewhere out there, the boats are gone. The sun has barely risen and is already sinking. And inside those houses, women are doing the quiet, unglamorous, heroic work of keeping an entire nation alive through the dark, feeding the children, calming the fears, holding the network together, waiting for the sea to give their men back one more time. It's a way of life that's slowly changing and in some places slipping away entirely. But for now, on these 18 islands at the edge of the world, it endures. And it endures because of them. You came here for the darkness and the isolation. What you found in the end was a story about the people strong enough to survive it, together. And that's the hidden side of the Faroe Islands. From its beautiful women and fascinating traditions to its remote villages, unusual foods, and everyday challenges, this is a place that proves the world is still full of surprises. But now we want to hear from you. Which fact surprised you the most? Could you imagine living here? And would you ever visit this place yourself? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next adventure into another fascinating corner of the world. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next documentary.